What's up, peeps? So today we're talking about 10 movements that I wish I did earlier. Movements that I have added to my training portfolio of gains and have provided some juicy dividends. Now, first up, we have the seated AD press. Now, AD stands for anterior deltoid, but I kind of like to think of it as the Alpha Destiny press because he's been using these for quite some time. I find that they are more consistent, they're more stable, and you don't have to worry about balancing. There's less of a mobility concern when you're going overhead from this position, and it's just a great overall deltoid mass builder. And between these and seated dumbbell presses, I haven't done a standing press in about a year. I just don't really see the point, I don't see the appeal, and I think this is going to be much more productive heading forward. One nice benefit as well is that you can incline the seat back a little bit. I like to use, looks like maybe 75 degrees or so, maybe a little bit higher, and this allows you to bring the bar a little bit more in front of you and actually to get better range of motion, at least from the perspective of the front delt. So you're actually getting a better stretch on the front delt, and anyone who thinks this is cheating, that's fine, but if getting better hypertrophy results is cheating, consider me a cheater. Next up, we have pull-ups. Now, these are something that I've had on and off in my training over the years, and one of the bad things about being in the fitness industry is that it becomes a little bit more difficult to get advice when you are perceived as an expert in the field. So I recently had a video on how I have lagging lats, and there were several comments where people are like, oh, just do weighted pull-ups. Well, I've done weighted pull-ups before. Okay, like thank you for the advice. Wow, I never thought about weighted pull-ups. However, there is a grain of truth here because I've taken them out of my program and put in pull-downs before at various points in my training career. And I think that a pull-down doesn't really replace a pull-up. At best, it's more of a supplement. And it's one of those things where you would say, okay, well, they're the same movement, right? Like one, you're pulling yourself up, the other one, you're pulling something down. They're not the same. They're definitely not the same, and it's hard to say exactly how they are different, but in terms of results, in terms of progression, they're just not the same.
Same, but different. But still same.
Pull-ups help your pull-downs way more than pull-downs help your pull-ups, right? There's sort of a one-way street when it comes to carryover here, and also in terms of the hypertrophy gains, they ain't the same. Number 3, we have sort of a double whammy, Smith machine hack squats as well as machine squats. Now, this actually came about because I got injured. I tore my QL in February 2022, so over a year ago now, and it was pretty bad. I could barely walk. I could barely put socks on in the morning. I couldn't sit for long periods of time. I couldn't stand for long periods of time. I could lay down for long periods of time, which was nice. Otherwise, sleeping would be tough. But it was pretty bad, and I could not barbell squat. I could not barbell deadlift. Couldn't even do a bodyweight squat. And so these were the first movements that I added back in for the squat pattern about 6 weeks later. And ironically, 2022 was the best year of quad gains that I've had ever since the first year of training. So both of these require less mobility, they give you more stability, and they allow you to actually push the quads to failure and have those be the limiting factor, whereas especially if you're a taller guy, you might not be pushing your quads to failure when you're squatting. I'm not saying they aren't taxing the quads, but they might be causing something else to fail before the quads. Number 4, the incline dumbbell bench press. Now, the reason for not adding this in earlier, I added it in May 2020, I kid you not, I remember this very clearly, was because I was too lazy to add a row in my Excel spreadsheet for tracking this lift. I was doing flat dumbbell presses, I was doing incline barbell presses, and I was like, yeah, I've got that covered. I don't need to add this movement in. And so finally, enough people said good things about it where eventually after 6 years of training or so, I added them in, and now I would say they're probably my favorite pushing movement. Great range of motion, great stretch at the bottom. They allow you to push to failure without worrying about having a barbell land on your chest and you have to roll it off or anything like that. So overall, an excellent movement, and one that I will definitely keep in my training long term. Number 5, and I just did a video about this, so I won't go into it in too much detail, are incline dumbbell curls. Excellent movement. I wish I had done them sooner. I've done them at a variety of inclines, a variety of degrees, and I enjoy them. They're great. They've provided great results, and they're a winner of a movement. By the way, I'm from the future, and big shout out to Boostcamp for sponsoring this video. They are the long-term sponsors of the channel. I have 2 programs up on the Boostcamp app myself. I hope you check them out. There is Ravage and Rampage. Rampage is 3-day per week full body, suitable for beginners or intermediates. And then Ravage is 6 days per week. Both are hypertrophy focused. You can also use the app itself to track your progress. It's super easy to use, very, very convenient. And there are a lot of other good programs from a lot of other top content creators in the space on there as well. And it's all free. So shout out to Boostcamp for sponsoring today's video. Number 6, Romanian deadlifts. Now these have been in my program on and off, similar to pull-ups. I've had them in, I've had them out, I've had them in, I've had them out. And usually when they are out, they are replaced with something that, in hindsight, was worse for hypertrophy. Just objectively not as good. Maybe I was maxing out on sumo deadlifts every day and I was too tired to do anything else. Maybe I was focused on power building and so I was doing, pause deadlifts off the floor or something super, super specific, trying to build up my 1-rep max. And ironically, I have found that doing RDLs for higher reps provides the better long-term strength gains anyway. It builds your base and it makes your potential 1-rep max higher. It just takes longer to show the gains. And nothing really replaces an RDL. Back extensions don't replace them. Maybe a stiff-legged deadlift at most, but sumo doesn't replace it. Conventional from the floor doesn't really replace it. Good mornings, maybe a little bit. But for me, there's not much that can actually provide a similar stimulus compared to a damn good hard set of RDLs. Number 7, an isolation movement, the long rope pushdowns. Now, I had been doing short rope pushdowns for a long time. I still do them. I do both variations, but I have found that these feel a little bit smoother. They are done a little bit stricter. You're getting a little bit more out of less weight. I've seen John Meadows do these. I've seen Alex Leonidas do these. And I'm sold. I think the contraction is better. I think the stretch is pretty decent as well. And for me, they're going to be something that I keep in my program and I track long term. Now, if you do track them, I would track them separately from the short rope because you're almost certainly going to be 20, 30, maybe even 40% weaker. And that is enough of a difference that you want to track them separately. Number 8. Upright rows. Now these are a movement that I've kind of dabbled with over the last few years, on and off, mostly off. And I think it's actually a good example of sometimes your expectations can cause pain. So you have some big YouTubers say, oh, this is the most dangerous exercise, oh, internal rotation, oh, impingement. And so you go into the movement expecting it to hurt, and it hurts. Surprise, surprise. And the mind is very powerful, but it can be turned against you very, very easily, right? So if you think, oh, well, this movement is going to really mess me up, you're going to be more aware of any sensations associated with that movement when you're doing it, or after, or even before. I would go into a set of upright rows and be like, this is ripping up my rotator cuff. It wasn't. And impingement might not even really be a thing. And so when I studied more, when I learned more, when I wasn't listening to, these big channels that are just fear-mongering, I went into the movement with an open mind, and suddenly it actually felt pretty good. It's one of those movements where I think you should experiment with your rep range, you should experiment with how high you pull, with your grip width, etc. And if it doesn't feel good long-term, even with, giving it a fair chance, I think you can dump it, fine. But at least give it a fair shake. Number 9, and I think the most recent addition to my program, are weighted planks. Now, Dennis Arnold talked about these, and I'm always looking for ab exercises that I don't fucking loathe. It's hard to find them because most of them just like, ugh, gross, disgusting. But I don't hate these that much, only a little bit, which is about as good as it gets for ab movements.
Let the hate flow through you.
I have a whole video on ab exercises that I've done that I don't hate, but these have felt really, really good. And I think for me, with my imbalances, with the QL injury, and even before that, I think for squat and deadlift, often the limiting factor is my ability to brace and keep everything locked in. It's not leg strength, it's not hip extension strength, it's not knee extension strength. It is my ability to keep my torso locked in, and I think weighted planks are very, very useful for that. Yes, it's an isometric contraction, but that can still build muscle, and that can still be very, very useful, especially as that is close to what you are trying to do with a heavy squat or deadlift. It doesn't mean that your spine has to be completely neutral and won't move at all, but usually the intention is at least to have that area braced and locked in. Number 10, we have the cable lateral raise. I added these in sort of full-time into my program, November 27th, 2021, and I do think that is an important consideration. If you add in a movement once for one workout, that doesn't mean shit, right? It has to be at least a few weeks, if not a few months, of consistently doing it at least once a week, if not multiple times per week, to see how you respond to it. And so some of these movements I had in my program, just a tiny blip in the spreadsheet. What matters is stringing together good workouts and progressively overloading over time so you can actually see how your body adapts and responds to that movement. And I barely do traditional, typical dumbbell lateral raises anymore. I found that cables get me a better stretch out of that bottom position. They feel smoother. It's a more even resistance curve. It's not that they're only challenging down here. I mean, they're also challenging at the top, and it just feels way, way more productive than dumbbell lateral raises. I still do those occasionally. I still think they're worth doing, but if you have the option to use cables, I think at least trying those early in your career is totally fine. Yes, progression will be slow just because it's a movement that you're not going to be loading very, very heavily. No, you won't be able to cheat as much, but in a lot of cases, that's actually a good thing. If you want to go beyond failure, you can add in partials or perhaps isometrics in that bottom position in order to get the juicy stretch. Anyway, for more training information about periodization, progressions, exercise selection, variations, and how to get the most out of your time in the gym, definitely check out my books. They have a lot of information that I just don't cover on the channel because there's not enough time. They are about 60,000 words each. The Ring book is a little bit less, but there's a lot of information in there that will be very helpful on your journey. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for the support, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.